Hello, good morning. My name is Jessica Peterson, and I would like to welcome everyone to today's WED Talk, Communicating for Impact. Before we kick off our WED Talk today, I would like to introduce the Director of Workforce and Economic Development for the County of Bucks, Billy Barnes. Thank you for joining us today, Billy.
Thank you for your introduction, Jessica. Good morning, everyone. I'm Billy Barnes, Executive Director of Workforce and Economic Development. On behalf of the Bucks County Workforce Development Board and the county, I want to welcome everyone to WED Talks. Today's discussion focuses on communicating for impact. The ability to communicate effectively with clients, colleagues, and executives is essential, whatever sector you work in. Good communication improves teams, inspires high performance, and enhances workplace culture. But you don't have to be the best communicator to give an effective presentation. With the right presentation tools, even the most hesitant speaker can enhance their delivery and increase audience engagement. Consider this. People are wired to listen to stories. But how do you create a presentation containing data and technical information with narrative designed to connect with your audience? What is the best way to integrate the structural, tactical, and personal aspects of a successful presentation? By joining our WED Talk today, you are ready to construct an engaging presentation from beginning to end. Let's introduce our expert who will lead today's discussion. Back to you, Jessica.
Thanks, Billy. I am pleased to introduce our WED Talk presenter, Kevin Crook. Kevin serves as a financial advisor at Raymond James & Associates, one of the nation's largest independent financial services firm, not headquartered on Wall Street. His primary focus is helping families and businesses navigate their journeys to achieve their financial life and goals. Kevin employs the vast resources to address specific financial needs, including retirement planning, estate planning, trust services, philanthropy, and wealth management. This comprehensive, solution-based focused approach delivers with constant personal attention, and a commitment to his clients' best interest sets him apart. He has served in a variety of senior roles in investment distribution and wealth management firms, such as BNY Mellon, Cohen & Steers, Capital Management, and Principal Global Investors. Kevin has represented a broad array of investment strategies to endowments, foundations, family offices, pension plans, private banks, consulting firms, and investment advisors. Welcome, Kevin, and thank you for leading our discussion today.
Thanks very much. Great to be here. It's an honor, and I'll try not to screw it up because since I am giving a presentation this morning to you. But welcome, everybody. Whether you're doing a presentation in person or you're submitting a proposal, writing an article, or even doing a job interview, you want that to be impactful and you want to get results because that's what it's all about, right? It doesn't make any difference what you say if you can't get a result that you want. I came across an interesting fact a couple of days ago. I was reading a book about Gettysburg, and at the end, they talked about the dedication of a cemetery, which took place 5 months after the battle. And there were two major speakers, one whose name was Edward Everett, who spoke for 2.5 hours. I don't know how you do that, but he spoke for 2.5 hours. He was a great orator, and he was followed by none other than Abraham Lincoln. Now, Everett's presentation was 2.5 hours. Abraham Lincoln's presentation was 2.5 minutes. Which one do we remember? In fact, many people have memorized the Gettysburg Address that Lincoln gave. So again, it's all about impact, not simply about what you say. Now, today's presentation is going to focus on getting the structure right. And I want to emphasize that getting the structure right is really a third of what I would call the key 3 legs of a stool on communicating. 1 being getting the structure right, structural. 2 being tactical, what you do when you're actually in the situation giving a presentation. And then 3, the personal element, what you bring to the table, behavior, dress, emotion, all those kinds of things. So we're just going to focus on structure today, which I consider to be the foundation, because if you're looking at it in terms of building a house, if you don't get the foundation right, what you do after that point doesn't really make a lot of difference, because even if you're a great presenter, if you don't have it organized properly and you don't have your focus and your points put together so that they flow, it's going to be very difficult to get the results you want. So this is just a piece of what would normally be, let's say, a 3 to 4 hour workshop, but we're going to take you through the presentation and the structure, which I believe is very important and fundamental. There also should be a couple of handouts that I had. One is for the workshop, the full workshop, and I thought it'd be helpful just to have that handout so you can reference it later. And it also gets into some of the tactical and personal aspects of communicating. And very important, the tool which I will reference in this presentation, I call it the presentation flow chart, which is really at the bottom line of structuring an effective presentation. And I will walk you through an actual presentation I gave recently. So if I were to ask you all at the end of this presentation, I'm going to select one of you to give a 20-minute presentation on a topic I will select. How many of you would be saying, well, bring it on? Probably nobody. But if you do practice what we talk about today, I can assure you that you'll feel much more comfortable and confident about presenting and communicating. So let's talk about where we're going. I have two pictures here on the intro slide. The impact dial, obviously we talked about dialing up the impact of your presentation, but why the bus? I put the bus here because I kind of liken your audience to the people on the bus. So you're the driver when you're communicating and you have the floor, and your audience is the people on the bus. So they're getting on your bus and you're going to take them on a trip. This is your journey. But let's say they don't know where you're going and they don't know how long it's going to take. And you're going to have after a little while, you're going to have a very disgruntled audience. So the key is to lay out the structure of your foundation so that the expectations of the audience are in line. They know how long your presentation is going to be. They understand where it's going. You've laid out some milestones that when they're looking out the window, they can see, oh yeah, he told me that I was going to see 3 things or 4 things out the window, and I can judge where we are in that presentation. I can follow along. The whole idea is to keep your passengers engaged in your presentation and interested, because otherwise, we've all been in presentations that go on too long and just wander, and we lose interest and we don't get much from it, and neither does the speaker. So you're taking them on a trip, keep them engaged. That's what the bus is all about, and help them follow along. Now I'm trying to change my slides here, but for some reason, this is not working. There we go. Okay, so the agenda. We're going to lay the foundation, and then we're going to populate the structure. We're going to complete the presentation flow chart. I'm going to show you how to complete it, in what order, and then we're going to talk about navigating that roadmap and actually the flow of the presentation itself. And then finally finish up with making your messages stick. Because after all, it doesn't really matter what you say. What matters is what people retain and act upon. And I'd like to just mention very quickly 3 organizations that I've drawn from that impact my presentation today. One is the Fusion Group from Florida, which has put out a product very similar to what I'm going to talk about today in terms of the flow chart. Decker Communications in California, San Francisco, who has a very similar approach. And we're going to finish up with the Heath brothers, who wrote a very impactful book called Made to Stick out of Stanford University. So let's get started. So laying a foundation. This is the foundation of your presentation or communication. It begins with analyzing the audience. And that's important because if you don't know who's in your audience, then it's going to be very difficult, that much more difficult to connect with them. So you want to do an analysis of who they are and think about what their concerns may be. What commonalities can you build on in your presentation? and what's in it for them? What's the benefit they're going to derive? Now, today, you're going to walk away from this presentation with a tool that you can use every time you have to present or put together a proposal or write an article. And I found I've given hundreds of presentations in my day in financial services, and I have found that I've gone to this format every single time I've given a presentation for the last probably 30 years. And I can tell you I'm not a great presenter, but it helped me to level the playing field and get my message across, and of course to get results. So analyze the audience, and I highly recommend if you're going in person to give a presentation, show up early, and if you have the opportunity, talk to some of the people that are going to be in your audience and find out what's on their mind, what's on top of mind for them, what do they hope to get from the presentation. Sometimes you'll get surprising feedback, which you can then at the last minute work into your presentation. So we begin with ideas and brainstorming. So the best thing to do when you're going to do a presentation and you have a topic is to kind of brainstorm whether you want to use Post-it notes or you want to use index cards. Just start writing down ideas that come to mind about your topic. Don't get so concerned about how powerful or relevant they are. Just write them down on a series of index cards or Post-it notes. And then when you're done, we're going to be taking those ideas and anything you brainstorm and trying to group them together. Is there a common theme that ties these ideas together into, let's say, 3 or 4 different groups? And those are going to be your main topics that are going to support your main idea or theme. So again, brainstorming, getting everything down on paper you can, and then organizing those index cards or Post-it notes into 3 or 4 groups so that those are going to be your supporting points that you're going to make about your 3 topics that again support your overall theme and idea. You want to begin every presentation at the end, which is establishing what your objective is. What do you hope to achieve by doing your presentation? What do you want the audience to do? What's the action step at the end you want them to take? Because that's what it's all about, right? You're doing a presentation, you're building your evidence, and you're going through your key points, but at the end, you want to know what it is you want to achieve. When you walk away, you want to ask yourself, did I really achieve what I came here to do? Did I get the next job interview? Did I get people to act in a way that I wanted them to? That's really the bottom line. So adding the structure. Once you have the foundation built, you have to have a unifying theme or main idea that ties everything together. And everything you do in your presentation should support that main idea. We'll talk more about that when we get to the flow chart. Below that main idea are the subtopics with supporting points. So I usually like to have no more than 3 or 4 subtopics in a presentation or an article or a proposal so that I kind of keep it simple. I don't get bogged down into too much detail, but I make it very clear that there are 3 or 4 major paragraphs, topics that I'm going to be covering. And you want to begin with a memorable introduction. If you can, whether that's a picture or something controversial or something surprising. It might even be a question that you ask the audience to begin the engagement with them. And then finally, again, what's the action step you want them to take? All right, now we're going to talk about completing the presentation flowchart. This is kind of the meat of what we're going to talk about today. Again, you begin at the end. You keep your items brief, and the idea behind what we're going to talk about in the next slide is to keep your ideas concise, to avoid clutter, and to eliminate those ideas that don't support your main objective. And I've found this to be incredibly helpful to eliminate a lot of the stuff that's really not going to be impactful, and to keep it concise and to keep your presentation flowing. And then for each key topic that you have to support your main idea, you have 3 to 4 supporting points per topic. So this is the presentation, what I call the presentation flow chart. So on the right-hand side, you'll see a box that talks about the stickiness of your presentation. We'll get to that towards the end of the presentation here. But on the left-hand side, you'll see the audience analysis. Again, who is it you're talking to? What are their concerns and expectations about your presentation? What are some of the commonalities you might have with them? That might lead into a story that resonates with them and your audience. Anticipate what kinds of objections and questions you might be getting from them, and think through, have all the responses you can mapped out before your presentation so that when you get to the Q&A, for example, you'll have a good answer. Number one is, what are the benefits they're going to derive from the presentation? It's all about your audience, after all. What are the benefits they're going to take away from your presentation today? And then what I referred to earlier as scouting, if you have an opportunity to interact with your audience ahead of time, maybe you could even call a couple of people in your audience if it's going to be a remote presentation, find out what they hope to get from it and get some feedback, and that will impact what you're going to talk about. So let's get to the flow chart here. And again, we start at the end with the action steps at the bottom. What is it that you hope to achieve? What is it that you want them to do as a result of your presentation? And that is connected to the main idea. What's the main idea that holds your entire presentation together? What's the main idea you want them to walk away with, which ties into your topic? Then we go to the introduction and theme, and your main topics. Topic 1, 2, and 3. I usually like to split it up into 3 parts. There are different ways to do that, but your main idea and your theme are essentially the same kind of thing. They might be worded differently, and we'll talk about that when I get to the next, when I get to the flow chart of a presentation that I gave recently. So there are different ways to break down a presentation. If we're talking in groups of 3, these are some of the things I'd like you to think about. And these are in the outline, the long outline that I attached. Some examples of that would be problem, concern, and a challenge. So in the supporting point, topic number 1 might be laying out the problem. What's the problem we have with this topic? Number 2, what are the concerns that we share? And number 3, what's the challenge we face and maybe a solution to that? So you could have solution, product, and service. You could have how to implement the solution. You could have a situation you lay out with an analysis and then a recommendation. I like one that has the landscape of the topic. What's happening now related to this topic right now? Let me paint a picture for you about the landscape. And then take a snapshot of where we are right now, and then talk about a specific solution. So again, sort of landscape, general, in the middle, a general approach to solving the problem, and then number 3 might be your specific solution, which ties into what you want the audience to do. So each topic again will contain supporting points that will drive home each topic. And then you get to the summary 1, 2, and 3, where you simply summarize each of the supporting topics to your main idea. And then you finish up with your action steps. Okay, now navigating the roadmap. We begin with the introduction, obviously, and then we lay out the theme and we introduce the main topics. We don't introduce one main topic and then start talking about the supporting points from that topic. We introduce all 3 topics at the beginning, and then we go to the supporting points for each. And we transition from one to the next, and I'll talk about how to do this in the next slide. Then we summarize each of the 3 main topics. We repeat the main idea, and then we have our call to action. So this is an outline of a presentation that I gave twice recently. One was to a group of about 30 people at a Chamber of Commerce. The other was to a church group of about 25 people. And the first presentation was about 35 minutes long. The second presentation was 8 minutes long. The point being that once you have an outline laid out, you could use it for an hour-long presentation. You could use it for an 8-minute presentation. Hopefully you'll have more than 8 minutes. But the point is that it's useful, it's not cluttered, and all you see here are not a lot of words, okay? But let me kind of walk through this presentation and how I went about filling out this flow chart and why it's important. So we begin with taking action, the action step at the bottom. And this was a sort of a motivational presentation, if you will, and it was all about the actions that we take as human beings. If you're somebody like me as a financial advisor, but regardless of what your job is and what you do for a living, you have interactions with people, both professionally and personally. And a lot of times those actions have impact, but many times we don't know what that impact might be, particularly when we're trying to help someone or give them advice. I call this at the end there the validation envelope. In other words, to give you an example, in April, May, students get envelopes in their mailbox. Hopefully that envelope says that they got into the top college they applied for. That's a validation envelope. What that does is validate all the work they've done from kindergarten through high school, and it's validated in the envelope. They got into a great school, and it just shows, you know, it kind of ties A to Z. Okay, they went through the process, they got the validation, they got the acceptance. But the point is, a lot of times we don't get that validation envelope in our mailbox for the things that we do. So I begin the presentation next with ordinary actions, extraordinary results. That ties into the validation envelope. So even our ordinary actions can result in extraordinary things. And then I fill out the main topics. And I'm telling people in this presentation that, and the way I open this presentation, by the way, is with a picture from the movie It's a Wonderful Life. And I'm presuming that most of you have probably seen that movie with Jimmy Stewart. And I kind of have a picture up there of Jimmy Stewart and the angel that's helping him throughout the movie. His name is Clarence. And I kind of have a little fun with that and get people involved with that. But the point is, I'm going to talk about 3, quote, George Bailey impacts, real life impacts that happened to me and why they're important. And I'm going to do that in the form of 3 pieces of paper: a letter, a file, and an invitation. And I actually show them the 3 things. These are the 3 topics I'm going to cover: a letter, a file, and an invitation. And then when I'm filling this out, I'm putting down my supporting points for each. And that is gripping news, a humble man, door to life. Notice there's not a lot of words here. The idea is that you can use this template, you can bring this up to the podium, you can have this in front of you when you're actually giving a presentation. It's not cluttered. It just gives you enough of a trip so that you can look at the words and it's a reminder of where you're going and what you're going to talk about. So let me walk through what I actually talked about here, and it might make a little bit more sense in terms of the flow. So again, I start with the introduction. I have the picture. I talk about ordinary actions getting extraordinary results. I talk about the 3 topics: the letter, the file, the invitation. And then I go right to the first topic. Let's talk about the letter. This was a letter I received, After my dad passed away, it was in the bottom of a box that was sent to me. I didn't know why it was there. I opened it up, and it was a letter to my mother from the local priest about where I was going to be buried. I was born with terminal cancer. So that was a big moment for me. I knew that I had trouble starting out, and I knew that there was some doubt as to whether I was going to live or not. But I found out in doing a lot of digging, I found out about the surgeon that saved my life, and he became a real life George Bailey to me. He had stepped in after two surgeries had already failed at 2 months old and 3 months old. This letter was written when I was 3 months old. And he basically gave this surgeon, he was the third one to give it a try. It's basically a Hail Mary pass. And obviously I'm here to talk today to you because of him. So he opened up a door to a life. Obviously what he did voluntarily had a lot of impact. He was a humble man. He was a volunteer fireman as well as a surgeon, an extraordinary guy, but just an ordinary guy. But he stepped in and saved the day. Now let's talk about the file. Fast forward to the year 2000, our families in the minivan, we get rear-ended trying to merge onto 95. We go to the local emergency room, we get checked out, everybody's okay. 2 years goes by, the perpetrator admitted his mistake at the scene, but paperwork takes time. My attorney shows up in my living room 2 years later, and he says, before we get started on wrapping this up, he pulls out a file and he shows it to me and said, look at this file. I just wanted to make sure that you took care of this carotid artery blockage that they found in the emergency room that day 2 years ago. I had no idea. The emergency room never told me about it. And my doctor obviously never knew because they never told him either. So my carotid artery was blocked, no idea why. I get it checked out, sure enough, I'm a walking time bomb. My lawyer, right then and there, turned into a superhero. Why? Just by doing his job. A routine duty, being thorough. He finds out the secret that was buried for 2 years. I had to go to the Cleveland Clinic and have a bypass done right away. And by the way, the reason I had that was because of the scar tissue that had built up from the original surgery as a newborn, had built up and totally occluded my carotid artery. I was a walking time bomb. Could have been that way for decades. Anyway, lawyer saved my life again, and he was just doing his job, but he had a huge impact. Finally, we moved to number 3, another George Bailey moment. I organized a college reunion and brought together a bunch of people for a reunion, and there were a few people who couldn't make it. It was a great success. It went very smoothly, but I caught up with a number of people who couldn't make it after the reunion took place. One of those people was also a financial advisor down in Kentucky, and we had a nice chat. We caught up on 40 years of history. And as I'm getting off the phone, he said to me, Kevin, I really want to thank you for what you did back in college. I had no idea what he was talking about. I said, John, what do you mean? What did I do? He said, well, I don't know if you remember, but junior year, you invited me to a Bible study that I attended. And from there, I have to tell you, I got much closer with God, and it really changed my life. So much so that, I brought up my family in the church, and we've had a great relationship with God. And I said, wow, that's really amazing. And he said, it all goes back to your invitation. And I said, wow, that really is a George Bailey moment. I had no idea that small invitation would have such an impact. And I said, well, thanks very much for that. And we're about to get off the phone. He said, wait, there's a lot more. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, I got involved in my church, and I got involved in their global seminaries and their organization. I joined their board, and this is one of the largest global seminaries in the world. And I found out that they had kind of drifted away from the fundamental teachings, and I went on a 5-year journey to get them back to fundamentals again. And I wrote a book about it, which he did, and I was very successful. And they got back to their foundation. And I thought, gosh, that simple invitation led to all of that happening. Really quite amazing. So then I wrap it up by saying that, we do our thing, and whether it's against, in the first instance, long odds that are unlikely to succeed, or in the middle instance with the attorney just doing his routine duties as we do every day, or maybe just an incidental action, we have no idea if it'll have any impact at all. But all three of these things, we're encouraging people to take action, right? We don't always get our validation envelope in the mailbox, so to speak, but it's out there. But a lot of times we just don't see it. And these are just three examples from my life, and we all have them, but there's many more that we just don't know about. The key, though, is to take that action, to volunteer, to advise, to help people, because you never know what George Bailey moment you might be having. Anyway, I hope that's helpful in terms of walking through how this all works and how it can be helpful in organizing your thoughts. And I've found that using this flow chart, you can take virtually any topic, and if you organize it properly, it will flow well. And again, you're beginning with your intro, you're stating your main idea, you're introducing the three topics all at once, and then you're going to your first topic. And then when you're done speaking about that, you're saying, now let's talk about the file. You're transitioning to each. You talk about the file, let's talk about the invitation. Again, the people on your bus are following you, and they're seeing where you're going, and they're keeping their interest, they're staying engaged. And then finally, you summarize your three topics, the long odds, unlikely success, your routine duties you carry out every day, and your incidental actions that you may think don't mean anything. And then finishing up with, again, your main idea and what you want them to do about it. Let me say a few words about this book, Made to Stick, which I read several years ago, written by Chip and Dan Heath at Stanford. I found this to be very helpful. It's sort of an additional filter, if you will, for your presentation, because you not only want it to be impactful, you want people to retain what you're talking about. And this simple formula that they talk about in detail throughout the book, I just have it summarized here, really has helped me a lot in terms of making my presentations resonate more. And that begins with simple. Is your message simple, or does it get mired down in too much detail? Keep it simple if you can. It's always wise to throw in something unexpected, like when I got that letter and I opened it up and found out it was about where I was going to be buried. Or my attorney gave me a file and it showed that my carotid artery was blocked, and it was a shock. Or I extended a simple invitation to a Bible study and it turns out to have global impact. So unexpected, always try to throw something in there that's going to get your audience thinking. It might be a question. It might be something you came across, which is really quite startling, but it gets them involved and engaged. Make sure that it's concrete. Don't make it too fluffy, but make sure it's based on facts. Stories are great because they're concrete, right? They happen to you, their personal experience. Hopefully people can relate to that. And make it credible. Make sure that it's believable. Emotions drive our decision making more than anything else. So make sure there's an emotional element to it. Obviously, in my presentation, there is emotion involved, and I kind of drive that home when I'm doing it in person. And stories are very important. The 3 stories I shared, for example. So the presentation I outlined for you, I'm not saying it's not perfect by any means, but it does, I think, touch on each one of these, and that helps to make it more memorable and more impactful. So what are the action steps that I'd like you to take today? Number one, create your presentation, brainstorm, get your ideas together, group them into topics to set your foundation. And then on those topics, you have your key points, which might be those sticky notes or those index cards. Try to group them into groupings that make sense, that are different from one another. This method of organization is proven. It works. I've used it for 30 years. And these organizations I mentioned at the beginning built the whole business on this kind of training. And we used to do it in the field with cameras and the whiteboards, et cetera. But I'm just giving you sort of a taste of that today. But it takes practice to do this, and use that flow chart, but use it consistently. And you'll find with practice that it really does give you a lot more confidence. And once you have a structure laid out, you feel much better about your message. And that gives you not only more confidence, but it gives you more energy. You know how it's going to flow. It's better for your audience because they can follow along with you and stay engaged on your bus, so to speak. And your message will resonate a lot better using this tool. So I encourage everyone to do that. And the handout I gave you on the workshop, when you have an opportunity, look at that, because there are some really good points there about not only the structure, but the tactics of delivery and what you bring in terms of personal aspects. And if I can help anyone offline, or you want to give me a call with questions about that, I'd be happy to get into that in more detail. But the bottom line is that you have a tool here, which I have found to be very useful. It's not complicated, it's simple, but it is impactful, and it does work. So with that, I guess I'm finished on my presentation. I'd like to open it up for any questions that we have.
Thank you, Kevin. Folks who attended, if you'd like to ask any questions, feel free to put your questions in the chat box and I can ask them for you. All right, we'll give it another minute. Okay, Kevin, I'm not seeing any questions coming in.
Okay.
I'll leave it open just another minute, but in the meantime, I would like to invite everyone to join our next WED Talk on Thursday, November 10th. Best-selling author and leadership coach Dima Gowie will discuss the 3 C's for managing unconscious bias. These 3 C's provide the tool set necessary for creating a culture of belonging and expanding diversity within the workforce. Look for a registration link on the calendar of events page at www.buckscounty.gov/PA career link.
Let me add that, most presentations that I did in my career have been what I would call persuasive. You're trying to, whether you're selling a product or a strategy, you're trying to persuade people to take a specific action. And I think the beauty of the flow chart is the fact that it simply doesn't give you a lot of room to write a lot of things in. And that's the whole idea. The idea is to be disciplined, to eliminate all the extraneous things that you might want to say or talk about that really don't add to the impact of your presentation. It forces you to be disciplined with your points and with your message, to get it down to the essence. And that, I think, is really the beauty of it. Not only that, but also the flow of how it goes from one to the next topic, but really getting your ideas down to the core, if you will. And that really makes your presentation much more powerful. And if you can work a presentation with just those key words, it's going to be much more powerful. and flexible. Again, it could be an hour long, it could be 30 minutes, it could be 5 minutes, but that will help you to navigate.
All right. Well, thank you very much, folks. Thank you, Kevin. We really appreciate you sharing all this great information. The individuals that attended today will receive a copy of the presentation. And if anyone did not receive the handouts, we will certainly make sure that you get them as well. So I wish everybody a great day, and thank you so much for attending.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.